Well, how the Hare Krishna movement started in Finland. So Finland, I'm from Sweden, Smita Krishna Swami, and Sweden and Finland had a long history together, maybe still has. Finland was part of Sweden for some 450 years, and then the Swedes lost it to whatever over to Russians in 1809. During the 19th century, Finland and Russia was coexisting quite nicely. The Finns were quite happy with the Russians. Though Finland is a country, they speak Finnish there, but as far as I remember, around 1864 was the first time when Finnish became an official language in Finland. So there was always there was Swedish, so there was like official language like Swedish, Russian, French. And then finally 1864 they also got in that Finnish also should be official language. In Finland there has been, since a long time, we don't know how long time, also Swedish living along the coasts. They speak Swedish speaking. Maybe it's from the Viking time or later, who knows. Somewhere late 19th century, the then Tsar wanted to make Finland more Russian. And the Finns didn't like that. Previously the Finns had been quite happy with the Russian Empire. They were giving a lot of freedom or something like that. But when they tried to make them Russian, they kind of didn't like that. So then, when it came to about the time of the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, Finland separated itself from Russia. The Bolshevik government approved of the separation, maybe just as a way of getting it. But Finland there was a civil war taking place after that, something 1918, 19. It was like the Bolsheviks against the whites in Finland. There was one general, Mannerheim. He was Swedish-born Finn, Swedish-speaking. He was personally also a friend of the Tsar of Russia, as he became a colonel in the army. Before the war, the Russians ended up with war in Japan, something in 1906, and he was fighting there. But then he helped to make sure that Finland became a separate country from Russia at the time of Bolshevik Revolution. Anyway, I like history. Maybe it has something to do with the start of the Hare Krishna movement in Finland also in some way. This Mannerheim, he also was sent as a spy during the Tsar Empire through the Mongolia and Asia, and under the name of some research. He also ended up spending 2 years on a horseback. And in this time he also came across the Tibetan monasteries, and as far as I remember also met with the then Dalai Lama. Later on he came to visit Nepal and visit the king there and shot a couple of tigers. Maybe it doesn't sound too great, but he had some connection with the East, so to say. Or maybe the philosophy and things. Finland separated from Russia. They had as their emblem on their at least on the Air Force, they had the swastika already some 1920 or something. The Nazis took the swastika, partly also inspired by Finland. So Finland didn't take the swastika from the Nazis, but the Nazis took it from Finland. The Finns were not specifically Nazis as like that, but had their own, to say, identity. The Second World War, then the Soviet Union wanted to expand the border a little bit to feel a little bit more safe. The Finnish border went about 30 kilometers away from the St. Petersburg. It was very close. It felt uncomfortable, but the Finns didn't want to give in to the Russians' request, and that might have been a foolish thing. So there ended up being the Finnish Winter War, 1939-40. And that went on for 105 days. And during these 105 days, the Finns lost some 27,000 men. Of course, the Russians also lost a considerable amount of people. The Finns had to give up a little bit, some 13% of the land to Soviet Empire. Of course, then came at that time the Russians were in league with Nazi Germany. But then the Nazi Germans attacked Russia, and Finland got involved, so to say, on the side of the Germans, and at least they liberated what they considered their occupied territory by the Soviet Union. And then a little bit later on, some late 1944 or something, Russia struck back, and so there was a lot of fighting, and more Finns died in that war. Of course, many Russians died also. Okay, so after the war, Finland was in debt, or they had to pay a war fine to Russia in all kind of ways. So this way, Finland had to produce a lot to satisfy the demands of Russia, the Soviet Union. And this meant that they didn't have such a good economy. They was kind of poor in a way. So 1973, so there was after the Second World War, they were paying off this debt, at least during the 1950s, maybe into the 60s. First time I came to Finland was 1973, along with one. I came to Finland, really came to, well, I could say I came to Finland. I came to Åland. Åland is a archipelago peninsula area between Stockholm and Finland. And that is there they were fully Swedish speaking, as a part of Finland, and it was an autonomous part of, some kind of autonomous part of Finland. So they had their own flag, for example. This guy, me and one devotee, Arista, went there for a 2 days excursion. We went ferry from Stockholm, and each had our backpack filled up with records and maybe some booklet. And we landed I think we landed in the morning, distributed in the local town, it's Mariehamn, I think it is. And took in on the youth hostel, stayed in the youth hostel over the night, and then went out and distributed the next day also, in order to take the ferry back to Sweden in the late afternoon. In the late afternoon, I encountered a young man who was he was an Ananda Marga or something. He was a nice guy, and I was standing there with my records. Actually, the deal was to sell him records. And at that moment, one young policeman came up and asked what we were doing. So this Prabhu, not devotee, but my young man there was, I was a young man, and he was Daddy, oh no, we're doing nothing, we're just talking here. And that was most probably my good luck, because I don't know really what the stance was of people selling things on the street in Finland at that time. So in any case, the police let us go and let me in peace. And this man, I don't think he took a record, but we did a few records, and we went back to Sweden, me and Arista Prabhu, after having distributed a few records in Åland, who is kind of an autonomous part of Finland at that time. That's the first time I know we went to Finland. 1970, spring 1974, I think it was. So then I was going to go there with, maybe this was spring, so maybe in summer '74, me and some devotees. I don't know really who was the chairman, who was some Kirtan leader. We got a Volkswagen bus with records, and we were going to go and distribute in Finland. There was me, and there was a godbrother of mine, Prabhujack, and there was some others. We were all disciples of Prabhupada at that time, it was '74. And we went up, made it very, I can make simple things very complicated. So what we did, we drove up along the Swedish coast towards the north, distributed in the towns, and then after a week or so we came to the Swedish-Finnish border in the north, and we crossed the border, drove south, and missed the town, because lying off the road, and came down somewhere along the coast in one town, Jakobstad, I believe it was. And then we distributed, and we thought we were going to be avant-garde, you know, straightforward Hare Krishna preaching. So we put on dhoti and tilak and distributed our records on the street in this town. It took about 2 hours. It took about 2 hours for the police to figure out that we were doing something strange. Figure out that we were there. That was something strange. So after 2 hours, the police came and arrested us, or interrogated us, and checked out what was going on. The sector kitchen department, one police thought that the ginger was very suspicious. They thought it was some kind of drug. They had too much of experience. And one lady there, she knew it was ginger, it was nothing. In any case, actually, they were very kind. Because they actually said, no, we have to leave the country within 2 weeks. So once as I gave up, I said we had planned to be there 2 weeks. So they had to tell us to leave the country, but we had to leave it up to 2 weeks. I didn't really understand what was going on. Well, that was maybe the first and the second town. Of course, we came to the second town. That I think was the second town. The second town we went to, then we could distribute for 20 minutes, and then the police came and took us. And still we were insisted on having dhoti and tilak on. We didn't play low key. Then what? Well, that's something. Well, so the second town was 20 minutes, and then I thought, well, we actually said we could stay for 2 weeks, but didn't say we could stay 2 weeks and distribute in the street. So in any case, we returned to Sweden. Maybe not so much experience, but in any case, we did something. Because at the towns we visited, we tried to visit what we could call Swedish-speaking towns. Then later on, we actually went to Finland again. If it was '74, I think we are in. Could be also be '75. But then we went with some Kirtan buses, records, and small groups. But we didn't put dhoti on. We didn't have tilak. Maybe we had tilak, but we didn't have dhoti on. Well, actually, I was traveling. No, that was someone else. But we were then distributing more shop-to-shop offices like this. No, the point here was people didn't buy much records there. And that is because of the story as I told before. Finland had to pay a lot to Russia. They just didn't follow the time. They didn't, as far as I understood, they just simply couldn't afford to have luxury things like record players previously. But now they started in the 70s, they're starting to have a better economy. So instead of record player, they get this cassette player. So they always asked for cassettes. We didn't have that. In any case, we didn't really follow the development yet, as of yet. But we had some tours in Finland in 70. I was maybe 74, maybe it's certainly 75, where we distributed records and books in Finland. One time I was in a distributing. I was ending up by a school. There's some students, maybe on the just next to the school, and there were some students there, and I was distributing to them. It was maybe the college or gymnasium in a Finnish, Swedish level. And then one, where the headmaster came out and asked what was going on, he thought it looked suspicious. One hand I wore pants and things, but I looked a little bit bohemic or something. Later on I came to meet one guy in Helsinki some 5-6 years later, there. And I was never a very high pressure distributor, so I didn't do too much. But I made a prayer to Krishna, God and Krishna. Says that, well, I can't do very much, but let me do something difficult. That was a prayer I had there while I was in Finland. That in the somewhere mid-70s. I know that other devotees went there to Finland. Some collecting parties went to Finland, and for some other part of the world. So they managed to mess up a little bit and make a little bit bad propaganda. Hopefully they collected some of their funds they wanted. They just complained a little bit. But I was in Sweden. I was for a while. I was some guitar leader in Sweden up until I think Radhasten in '78, and I had to take a break and became a Pujari instead for up until 81 something, 81. Then I was serving with a Gurukul in Sweden for 10 months or something, realizing it wasn't really my thing. And then after that must be in early 82, I kind of quit that, and I got assigned to go to Finland. There was already one devotee, dear Shanta Prabhu, my good god brother, who had been in Sweden and also he's from England. And he had gone to Finland to open up the preaching, and he actually wanted to preach, not just to distribute some records or some books or collect some funds and trying to get something out of them, but he went actually there to preach. And I would say that is to his credit. And I would say he is very bold. Now so I joined him sometime 82, early 82. He had managed to get together rent a cellar localities in downtown Helsinki that had formerly been a sauna, a communal sauna. And you should know that in Finland, sauna is an important part of the culture. In Estonia also, and I think in Russia also, in the northern parts, you just have to have a sauna. So in Finland it is like this. Every house have to have a sauna. So if they build a apartment building, there was always a sauna in the bottom of it. Later on, in the modern times, actually each flat has its own little sauna. Otherwise, it's not livable for a decent Finnish citizens to live in a place where there's no sauna. Well, it's good. Okay, so the point was we had this cellar locality that had been a sauna and had been transformed, so it was a temple, the Brahmacharya ashram temple and things like that. It was quite a lot of square meters, but it was like halfway under the ground. And Dear Shanta was a little bit paranoid about the police, maybe rightly so. So when we went out and distributed like that, we were not allowed to say where we were living. because we're actually living, maybe it was illegal to live in this cellar locality, by the way. Well, I eventually got registered living by one Mr. Sood, a friendly Indian who had come to Finland with his family and established a traveling agency there. I was registered as living there. And we went out and we had our locality and went out and distributed. And Finland was a Helsinki or Helsingfors was a little bit heavy. It's heavy moves, heavy buildings, and I was feeling heavy. You feel like KGB was watching you, and maybe the literally speaking was doing, because Finland was partly, they had a non-aggressive alliance, military alliance. So there was kind of almost part of the Warsaw Pact, not officially but unofficially. The US kind of considered that Finland was a part of it sometime, not officially, but so yeah, there was many interesting thing happening there. Finland, so there was coming quite some Russians came and visited Helsinki and Finland. So there also was, we had a Russian preaching going on from Sweden. The headquarters for the preaching was, I think I can say that now without any dangers to anyone's life, was at ISKCON in Sweden, our farm community there. And it was Kirtiraj Prabhu who was staying at ISKCON and heading up to free the Russian committee and all these kind of things. What's going on from very much. The headquarters was in Sweden at ISKCON. So we had our preaching center there, so that preaching, by the way, also there was also Russian books printed. I don't know where they were printed, small pocket with tiny like miniature books, and that were like freely distributed, or kind of devotees went there and put them in, I know that they put them in trucks, Russian trucks that were parked down by the harbor. They went to the hotels where the Russians were staying over the night and sneaking in and put it in every room, putting a Russian Bhagavad Gita small miniature in there, so that the Russians came there and they would find a Russian Bhagavad Gita and take them with them home. So that was part of it. But now I wasn't really part of that. I was part of the official Hare Krishna movement in Finland, and I was giving a task by the well, in any case, I just did what I asked. I was tasked to register the movement in Finland. Now, this time, actually, was maybe the only time I really got some kind of, I found it actually useful, my education in my youth, before I joined the Hare Krishnas in the economical line of a gymnasium in Sweden. I got some understanding of bookkeeping and these kind of things. That wasn't really Dear Shanta's side. So I was giving a contact from Sweden of someone who could help. So I phoned him up, and he was working on a university at lawyer level. But he didn't want to do anything himself, but he gave us a contact with another man, another lawyer who had been registered in religious organizations in Finland. And now the interesting thing then, that he comes back, there was a law in Finland that was a remnant from the Tsar Empire time, sometime from 1875. And the Tsar Empire was a big empire, and within that empire there was Jewish, there was Catholics, there was Orthodox, there was Buddhists, and I don't know what more there was. What Muslims, yes, there was Muslims, at least 5 different kind of religious denominations. And as a good Tsar, emperor, there was a law that provided religious freedoms for all these different religions. So there was a law in Finland from the Tsar time that you could register as a religion in Finland and have like a certified religious status and rights. So this lawyer knew this, and he had done it before, and he was now going to fix this for us. And he thought it was going to take 3 months. It took about 2.5 years. It wasn't quite so easy, but actually at the end of the story, at the end of my stay in Finland, their movement became registered under this religious heading, and that gave us right to exercise a religion on street, publicly or privately. And privately, that's written in our constitution, was also to like distribute books and Harinam and things like that. So when the devotees are being in Finland, and even up until today, I'm being told, this registration is very handy, because it actually, under that registration, we can distribute the books on the street, even though we otherwise maybe don't like street salesmen, so to say. So that's a little bit about the beginning of the Hare Krishna movement in Finland, as I know it. And they came, the Shanta Prabhu stayed and did a good job, groundwork to start up the whole thing. And the movement has continued and continues today, and it's going strong. And that registration, actually, my Karmi name is there in the official papers, printed somewhere. In any case, I can be a little bit proud of that. Because I did something difficult, okay? So Krishna let me do, as I prayed there in the mid-70s, I asked for, let me do something difficult, so he let me come back and spend sometimes a little bit difficult years in Finland, helping to get a good registration done. Okay, enough for today. Hare Krishna.